Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday market snapshot for the Ottawa real estate market for Monday, March 25th, 2024. My name is Annalie Rice. I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario, and every week I bring you the details of what's going on in the Ottawa real estate market. Now, this is our last week before the end of March, and we've had lots going on so far this month, and I'm going to point out a little bit on what I think might happen over the next week, and then moving past the long weekend, which we have next weekend. Let's go. Okay, first off, we see citywide that the number of active listings climbed by nearly 100 this past week. Most notably in the detached and condo market, towns were just up just slightly. Sales, on the other hand, were actually down slightly. The sales for detached were up slightly, but the townhomes had quite a decrease in the number of sales this past week. Condos were down slightly as well. Okay, so when we look at the inventory in chart format, you can see it a little bit better visually. So the overall inventory, that's the black line, is continuing to climb, and we're getting up quite high, especially compared to what we had last year at this time. The active inventory, that's the green, we're up at about 1,840 listings, active listings right now. And if you look back to the same time last year, sort of the May into April, we were sitting at about 1,500. So we've definitely got lots more inventory on the market right now. The sales have picked up. They are higher than what we saw in March of 2023, but they're not as high as the inventory is high. So that's why we're seeing like the inventory is climbing, and we just have to wait and see whether or not the sales are going to pick up much, like significantly higher than what we saw in 2023. I think we are going to be higher, but by how much, that will dictate what happens with the price trends. You can see the number of conditional sales this past week did tick up. It's up around 260 or so. So next week, we do expect that the number of firm sales will be higher. Okay, so new listings. We had 459 properties that were listed this last week. 85 of those properties, or 19%, were relisted properties. That's the gray line at the bottom. And we had 374, or 81%, were new to the market properties. So that's the blue line. The sales, as you can see, the last 2 weeks had slight lower number of sales, but that's largely to do with having been March break last week, and then or a week and a half ago, I guess there, and then the fallout from that is when you have fewer conditional sales during a week, then the number of sales, firm sales, the week after is lower. So I do fully expect that the number of sales, firm sales this coming week will be much higher. As I mentioned on the last slide, the number of conditional sales this past week was much higher. So the firm sales will follow this week. Now, this coming weekend is a long weekend as well. It's our Easter weekend. It's quite early this year. So we're going to see a decrease in the number of, probably the decrease in the number of conditional sales this week and next week a little bit. And also listings. A lot of people will hold off until after Easter to list. So expect that the new listings this coming week will be lower, and then the sales will dip a little bit next in the week following Easter as well. Okay, so we can look at the sales. Let's first off, we had 20% of the properties that sold this last week sold with no conditions, and 37.4% of the homes sold at or above asking price. We can break it down into the properties that sold within 7 days or 30 days. So first off, 21% of the homes that sold this week sold within the first 7 days on the market. That was 43 properties this week. 35% of those properties sold with no conditions, and 77% of them sold at or above their asking price. So definitely a bit more of a tight market for high in demand homes hitting the market priced either competitively or well. That's where you're going to have potential competition, more likelihood of no conditions, and shorter conditional periods, and higher prices. Sales within 30 days, 62% of the properties that sold this week sold within 30 days. That was 127 properties. 18% of those sold with no conditions, and 50% of those sold at or above asking price. So I am kind of making, a point that, a good proportion of the properties are starting to sell more quickly within that 30 days, and a lot of them are starting to sell at or above asking price. I have checked a few times just to see how many places are starting to price unrealistically, like they're pricing super low to drive competition or multiple bids. And I don't see it being a very common thing at this point. There are some properties, but that's where you really do want to speak to your realtor and find out whether or not if a price seems too low to be true, then it probably is, but it's not that common, and it's definitely not the norm at this point. Okay, let's zoom in and see what we have across the different regions of the city. So first off, the central urban region, we have an increase in active listings across property types, lots of new condos and some new detached. Sales were actually pretty slow. They were down for towns and condos and just up by 1 for detached. In Canada and Stittsville, we had a slight increase for properties listed across property types. It's quite a number of detached homes that are on the market in Canada and Stittsville right now, and it's still climbing. Sales within the last 7 days in Canada and Stittsville, pretty slow. Detached and condos were just up slightly. Townhomes were down fairly significantly. And in Barrhaven and Riverside South, the active inventory just climbed just a little bit across property types, and sales were up slightly for detached, down by half for townhomes, and steady for condos. And in Orleans, we had a pretty mixed bag for the active inventory, just slight increase for detached. Again, quite a number of detached homes on the market. Steady for townhomes and up slightly for condos. And the number of sales were down for towns and condos and steady for detached. Here I've got the full details for the residential detached, and I do need to, you'll notice that perhaps the numbers for the city and the central urban, I've got a couple of them there marked in red. And when I was looking at the properties that were listed, I had noticed recently that, the average detached price, asking price was so much above $1 million. And I was looking, and there were 5 properties. They're downtown properties, adjacent properties, and there's 5 properties, and there's actually a 6th one. I couldn't find it, but they're all 5 of them listed at $4.25 million. And the thing is that the prices are actually the price to buy all 6 properties. So they're trying to sell, a big grouping of properties for a development of some sort. But I find it a little bit, it messes up the numbers. So in the case of the citywide numbers, the average list price there at 1.193 is actually increased by about 16,000 because of these 5 properties listed at 4.25. And in the central urban region, obviously because fewer of those properties, those 5 properties skew that asking price by over 50,000, 56,000. It increases it. So I'm not a big fan of if you're selling them as vacant land to be used for development, and they're not vacant obviously, but they're certainly not being sold as single family detached homes for somebody to buy and live in. I don't think they should be listed there because it really does skew the numbers. And when those properties sell, if they mark them sold, it'll skew the sale numbers as well. Anyways, all that to say, this is the full residential detached market numbers. And we have the full details for the residential townhomes and for the condo market. Okay, so that's about all I have for today. I did want to just sort of go over it again, is that I think we're sort of at a turning point here in the market here. The things are definitely quicker, and there's lots more on the market, and sales are picking up at a faster pace. But the inventory levels climbing such as they are, if they continue to climb and the sales don't pick up proportionately, then we may end up a little bit more in a market more like what we had last fall, where there was lots of inventory and the buyers had a little bit more control. The prices sort of stay moderated. But if the number of sales really does pick up, like if there's any more hints of a interest rate drops or the fixed rates start going down, If they start eating away at the active inventory, then we might start seeing a little bit more pressure on the prices to go upwards. So again, this all is specific to certain markets. Talk to your realtor, find out what's happening for the type of home that you are looking for in the area that you are looking. And I hope you have a fantastic week, last week of March.